I would like to thank other technical program chairs, Max Wilson, Navina Karusala, Toby Lee, and Erin Soloway, also the student volunteers, Alberta Anza, Isabel Munoz, and Nabil CH. And I would like to also thank our sponsor, National Science Foundation, for partially funding this event. So this event, as you might already know, is going like the previous ones. First, we have half an hour of conversation between me and our guest, Virpi, and then where I'm going to ask her questions. You're invited to type your questions actually in the chat. So once our conversation is finished, starts the second part of the conversation when you start asking Virpi your questions. And then we stop recording, and then we have our informal part of the talk where we can chat about different topics about this conversation. So who is our guest and what are we talking about today? Today we are talking about service experience design at work, for work with Virpi Roto, who is best known for research on user experience design, UX definition, evaluation, and design, which she started in early 2000s in Nokia Research Center. Since 2011, she's worked at Aalto University Department of Design as a professor of practice in experience design. She has developed the practice of user experience design through studies in work context in heavy industries, and in several projects, her and her team focused on how the transformation of work with intelligent systems and technologies could improve employees' experience and well-being, and how can we design systems for that. And she and her team believe that human well-being should be the primary success factor for designing intelligent systems, so that they suggest that new technologies at work should be designed as services for the employees. And this has led to developing a methodology called service experience design, which we will talk about today, that combines user-centric experience design and service design that aims to create value for all stakeholders needed for service delivery. Welcome, Virpi. Do you?
Yes,
okay, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here. I have checked this CHIWORK community, but I didn't really know how to participate, but this is a great start for my participation in this community. Thank you for invitation.
You're welcome. We're happy to have you here. So let's just get started before our time runs out. I know your work on experience design, and I have seen a lot of your research has focused on experience design at the work context. Can you start maybe telling us a little bit about the status quo of experience design at the work context first?
Well, in short, experience design is very rare at work from my perspective. So some people might think that this is not true, as HCI, human-computer interaction, has studied work contexts since the beginning of this field, since 1980s or even before. So HCI did get started from the need of making systems at work more understandable and usable, but that's not quite what I mean by user experience or experience design. So for me, user experience is more how a person feels about using a product or service. And this is what we have been discussing a lot when we were working on definition of user experience when it came early 2000s as a buzzword to this field. The meaning of this word has changed, and it's no longer the original meaning of the emotional aspects of product use, but it's often used as a synonym for usability. Okay. Well, if user experience is about emotional aspects, then experience design is designing for certain type of experience. And it's not only removing the usability problems or removing the frustration experience, but there's some positive experience that we want to design for. And well, our literature review with Pnar Simsek and Teija Vainio shows that there is very little UX research at work that would focus on emotions. It's mostly on performance and usability. But we did find some experiences that are there being researched and studied in industry. I don't know, Pnar, could you maybe elaborate on what kind of experiences there were so that people get some kind of idea what we mean by emotions and experiences?
Yeah, can you hear me well?
Yes. And hello, Pinar.
Hello. In our review study, we have listed all the UX dimensions that we gathered from all the reviewed papers. And we have found that some UX dimensions targeting hedonic aspects of tool usage, not only the pragmatic ones. For example, playfulness, excitement, enjoyment, fun, joy, pride, and happiness. Actually, when we look at our list, we have seen that there were quite many of these hedonic experiences. But when we look closer, we have seen that they were coming from only a handful of papers. In our study, there were 52 papers and only 12 of them mentioned hedonic aspects, and the rest, they were focusing on pragmatic aspects of tool usage. And more importantly, they didn't really talk about them as a main discussion. They only mentioned and kind of superficially mentioned hedonic aspects. So that we can say that there's a lack of research targeting hedonic aspects, experiences in relation to tool usage at work, especially positive experiences. And when we consider their relation with well-being, we can clearly say that we need more research regarding employee well-being at work in relation to tool usage and experiences.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting. So you mentioned well-being and people's well-being, and I was and a comparison of this hedonic and pragmatic aspects of designing like technology. And so to my understanding, pragmatic aspects go more to the usability questions, and hedonic comes to the experiential aspects of the design of the interaction. What I was wondering is that when we look at the work context and the introduction of these intelligence systems, which you also have addressed in your research in the last years, how does this change, and how can we design for the well-being of people? Because either we want it or not, some parts of the jobs are taken, or the practices at work change, and how do we design for that?
Yeah, definitely the work tools will change a lot when these intelligent systems arrive to workplaces. So I see this an excellent opportunity for the CHIWORK community to revolutionize the experience of employees and their well-being, because we can now design new types of systems to work when AI systems arrive. That's a big opportunity also for the CHI community to try to influence the new work and future of work. And I hope that it's very much about human well-being, because IEEE, for example, tells in their guidelines that human well-being should be the primary success criterion for designing intelligent systems. So this is something that I love as a statement and requirement, and this is not very clear in the present state of the art in how we design experiences for industry. So I think this kind of mindset of designing for well-being needs to be taken in human-computer interaction field, because we no longer design for usability only, we design for well-being when we design intelligent systems. Of course, usability is there as well, but well-being should be the primary success factor for these systems. And yeah, this is where we need thinking, or I find it very good to start thinking of these systems as services for the employees. And this is where we need service design.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. But what do you mean by service design? Like when you talk about systems as services and going from experience or usability, like interaction design to service design, what does it mean?
Well, that's we have very short time, and service design is a quite big topic. It's a methodology for designing services, surprise, surprise, with a customer in the center, but still they have this value creation for all stakeholders that are needed for the service delivery. So user journey map might be the best known service design method under this service design methodology that HCI has adopted from service design. But like UX became a buzzword and became a synonym of usability, so also service design's meaning has changed in people's head. And the early 80s, when Šostek started to talk about how to design for services, this HCI and service design has been different tracks, kind of, and when HCI people think about service design, they just think that it's interaction design because every app is a service, so we do service design here. But there is actually a methodology which is rather successful in companies called service design.
Okay, and when we think about this methodology, like how does it differ from user experience design? So, for example, there are different approaches to user experience design, and then I was wondering, like, how is this different from service design?
Yes, that's also a very good question, because often people don't see any difference there. We have done a survey study around the globe where we asked how people see user experience design versus service design, and there it's a mess. Most people don't see very clearly the difference. They just pick the methods they want and need, and they don't care which methodology these methods go into. But this paper elaborates on these differences. I think we talked about like especially this user-centeredness of HCI or UX, and then in service design they talk about stakeholders and try to make all stakeholders that deliver the service they want to create value for all of them. So value creation is a very important concept of service design. They have the value creation like the main goal, versus we might have the user experience as the main goal of our design. So and also UX design is often focused on some single application or single product, but service design studies the whole service journey through many touch points and channels. And touch point might mean that there's one digital app on the way of the service journey, but it's just one part of the journey.
Okay.
And yeah.
Sorry, well, go on.
Then I think service designers are limited when they think about good user experience or how they make good experience of the service. So then they think about optimizing this journey typically. So they optimize the journey, and we think in HCI and experience design that optimizing only removes the problems, removing the feeling of frustration maybe, but removing the negative is not enough for well-being, and well-being requires to focus on the positive side, not only removing the negative side. So we talk about positive design when we talk about well-being and how to make employees flourish as at work. So user experience design needs better understanding of the holistic service journey, and service design needs better understanding of experience design. And that's why we thought that we need to combine these two methodologies to service experience design.
Very interesting. That's indeed true, because a lot of HCI papers start like with a statement of the problem and designing for solving that problem to bring it to the what we call normal state where there is no problem. So basically, exactly as you mentioned, removing the problem, but not just starting from the baseline that we have to make it better, to the more positive side of the things, that people are feeling actually more in a better state than actually they would feel in the normal way. But going back to your topic, so what is the approach in service experience design? You mentioned a bit about experience design and service design, but you said you combine these two as the service experience design. Could you say how this methodology is defining that?
Yeah, indeed, the basic idea is to combine the best parts of service design and user experience design or experience design. And this is what we have been working with Arne Leinonen in our team in Aalto. It's a new methodology that has many parts and many methods inside there. And it's a process where we go through some co-design workshops, for example, and we also use the journey map from service design with the touch points. And then experience design comes with something that we have developed many years ago, experience goals, like setting goals for experiences, what kind of experience we want. And then there's also overarching experience vision set in our methodology. And experience actions bring together service design and experience design concretely, because when we have the customer journey and then there are different touch points, then we think about how the experience goals could be implemented or provided in each touch point, and we call those concrete actions as experience actions. So this is quite immature state still about the methodology development where we now are. We have one final report of one research program called Index, where we have written the basics of these methods, but the cases we have done so far have stopped with the service concept. That's also the point where typically the service design stops. When there's a service concept, then the company decides whether they will implement this service concept, and then the development and the evaluation of the service will come later. Maybe, I don't know if this gives a good understanding yet about service experience design, but at least hopefully the basic idea of combining service design and experience design.
I think we all have to read through this report to get a better grasp of what you're talking about. But I could imagine like how you could think of like all the stakeholders, their values, and so on, and the whole journey together with the experiences that you want to aim for to be combined in an approach and a methodology for designing technology. But what comes to my mind is that you also mentioned a lot, talk about a lot the intelligence systems and introduction of intelligence systems technology to workplace. And what I know, for example, or what I've seen is that a lot of companies or organizations introduce, for example, AI-based tools as like tools for their workers, and they are kind of forced to work with those tools and without having a decision on that, or the tools are already designed and given to them and so on. And I was wondering that if you think this approach, the service experience design, would change something in the user experience in the future of user experience of people who are working in general or at workplace, and how, if it changes.
Yeah, so I certainly hope that HCI researchers could study not only this work optimization and performance, but employee well-being and what makes employees flourish at work. And maybe step one would be to think about AI as a service for employees, and not vice versa, because I'm afraid currently many AI systems think that the employees are there to serve the AI system, and that's the worst. If somebody needs to monitor what is the automated AI system doing, that's a servant position for the AI. But the most important takeaway from here is that AI systems should be services for employees. And this is not often the case in current work contexts that I have been studying, but AI systems are still very immature, and we need to develop the human-centered part of them. So, and we at academia need to develop these methods and methodologies, such as this service experience design that help AI developers to design for employee well-being. And we should make sure that AI systems will improve the well-being and not do the same as earlier the computers when they came to workplaces. It was quite a big ethical discussion back then, and I think when AI comes, we have still the same ethical discussion about, is it okay that AI does some part of the job?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. I think so. With now, I will just stop asking my own questions, because we have a lot of big number of audience here. And I would like to invite you to write your questions in the chat, or simply raise your hand virtually or on your camera. I try to follow up. And but before we go to that part, I would like to ask, first of all, thank Virpi and Pina for joining us and answering the questions in these conversations. And thank you. And if there is any thing to add before we close this part of the conversation, please feel free to add. Then we can start the question. Okay. So, are there any questions?
Yeah, probably these were quite. We covered a lot shortly, so it's hard maybe to cross.
Andrew has a question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this, and I'm curious about the journey, and I'm sort of imagining it, but how many I think you might have used the word touch point. So how many of these, and I assume it's sort of a circular thing, or how does this look in time and space, if you will?
Yeah, very good question. So service journey or user journey or customer journey or employee journey, they anyway have always this linear, like stepwise process that you go through. So An example of a service journey might be something when you buy a ticket or travel by train. So first you need to figure out when are the trains going. So you use the timetable service. Then you go to buying the ticket either online or sometimes with a person at the railway station. And then you jump on the train, and at the other end or in the train you might show your ticket. So these are steps along the service journey. So this has been there since 80s, this kind of structure. And then in service blueprint, it starts from this journey, and then it starts to map the different activities that has to happen at the background, behind the scenes, to make this service actually work. And those are the stakeholders that work behind the scenes, and they must be taken into the same co-design table to provide them some opportunity to check that they will also create some value from this service. And HCI typically takes the user, the passenger in the center, but doesn't really think about the other stakeholders. And this has been maybe the reason why we have struggled to get companies adopt user-centered design, because the management doesn't care. They just hire a UX person and think that they are experts in making the system usable and nice user experience. But in service design, value creation, the promise of focus in the value creation, that interests the management much more. And luckily, service design is also very human-centric method. So this service design, at least in Europe, has been much more successful in my mind than user-centered design has been. So I'm very happy that finally companies do quite a lot of human-centered design via service design, if not user-centered design.
Thank you. I think with examples, everything becomes a little bit clearer for everybody.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So we have another question from Abdo. Abdo, you can unmute yourself and ask your own question.
Sure. Thank you, Virpi, for your conversation. I was just curious about this whole service design methodology, because you paint it as a very nice, clean approach that can always result in positive things. So I'm wondering whether you've had, in your experience, any situation when you went through this journey to design for well-being, but it ended up having the opposite or unexpected effect when later on it was deployed to users or stakeholders. So I'm wondering, is this methodology infallible, or is there room for human error even when you try to go through it systematically?
Yes. So, well, like we have done only the early parts of service or the development of a service, because we see that service design is in the beginning of the service design, and then with service concept, the companies can decide whether they will start implementation, and typically UX design happens during the implementation phase. And we haven't gone through with our new methodology this whole end-to-end process. And sometimes things take a lot of time in companies, and from the point when a service concept is created, it might take years even until the project starts, where this concept will be implemented, and it will be very different from the early days of designing it. So these are the topics that Arne Leinonen is actually investigating in his doctoral studies. like how to make the service concept information and all the information flow to the UX design part later on. Actually, I forgot your question now. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, I understand it. So it's usually on a longer time scale. So it's hard to know whether, you know, any unexpected effects came about due to the service design, or was it due to maybe the execution of the implementation, or just a different target group in the end that ends up using it. It's hard.
Yeah, that's true, because in real life out there, our methodologies are not the only thing they do, but there are lots of different aspects that influence implementation, and things will change always during the development. So, but yeah, I often see that service design is like usability centric when it comes to the implementation, and there is not so much about understanding about good user experience. I think HCI has better understanding of what we can do, at least on the digital side of the service, to improve user experience.
So I don't see any questions in the chat, but if there are other questions that you didn't type, just raise your hand and or unmute yourself and start asking.
There was something at least in the chat. Are you sure there's no questions?
Oh yes, I see one.
Some
yeah,
long,
you're
long
right.
texts, I see.
Yeah, you're right. Karine, if I'm pronouncing your name right?
Yes, that is correct. Hi, Virpi. Nice to see
Hi,
you.
Karine.
I do have a question, and actually it came from a recent experience discovering or being in touch with the field of service science from the more economical / business viewpoint. So my question is, like, how does, according to you, service design or service experience design relate to or overlaps with this service science big discipline? And they have their own, you know, journals and methods or way of doing things. They are very much also driven by quantitative studies and surveys and modeling what's going on. And so, for instance, they have those customer orientation, customer need knowledge, customer rapport. And we can, when I look at them, it makes me think of some, you know, concepts that we are looking at in HCI, at least, experience design as well. So how do you see service experience design in relation to that other discipline? Are we complementary? What do we bring to the table? Are there things that are just the same, but not with the same labels, that we just, you know, don't talk about the same way? Or what do you think?
Yes. So indeed, service design has been developing in business research part, and management studies, I guess, as well have been there. So that's why HCI is not aware of this early development of service design. So we are just a few years ago starting to use these customer journey or user's journey map. And yeah, of course, the business around services and the research around services, there are so much work being done there that I'm not aware of much of it. But obviously there's a community inside business domain that is interested in how to design for services. They have been developing this service design methodology, and then we kind of try to get these both into the picture. Often in companies who do service design, they have some business students who are interested in designing services. And then UX designers might not even participate the service design part in the beginning, because it's much more like I said, value creation is in the core there, but still they do also qualitative studies of users' needs there. And sometimes user experience designers are involved in service design phase. I don't know if this is in line with your thinking.
That's definitely aligning with what I also observed. I'm just thinking, and I just can't get my head around it, like what I know we can bring something different because we also have different influences and different, but it's just hard to articulate because it would take us to engage even way more with their literature, their way of doing. What exactly is that original viewpoint that we bring there and how it relates to what they've been doing? Because we could also look a bit like condescending to arrive and say, hey, Jörg, we're going to revolutionize what you've been doing for 20 years and we have this new concept and things, when actually they might think they already do it in a way. And they'd be like, okay, yeah, well, that's just another name for what we've been doing well. So, so
like also in HCI, people think that service design, this is what I have been doing all my life.
Yes, I do think so. That's there is always this tension, right, in our job. So I was just like, I was just curious about your thoughts. So thank you so much for having answered.
Yeah, thank you for nice question.
Oh, yeah, thank you, everybody. I'm still looking at the list, so I hope this time I don't miss any questions. I try to scroll properly this time. That's the skill I have to gain, obviously. And so I'm not seeing any questions, so maybe I can ask another one if there's no one else having a question. Because you, with more examples that you mentioned, it became also much more clear. But I would like to understand that when I think that when organizations invest in new tools, they are mostly driven by, for example, aspects related to performance, or what you call like the pragmatic aspects. Like they're more interested in how much they win business-wise, and like how faster and more efficient things get, and so on. And when we think of like the experience and well-being of the employees, that's not maybe most of the times playing a role. And in your service experience design approach, you're trying to take the values of all the stakeholders. How do these hedonic and pragmatic aspects are normally balanced with each other, that you kind of have the performance and pragmatic needs fulfilled, but still aiming for the well-being of the employees, for example? Do you have any experience?
Yeah, so I think we need both, of course. So there has to be the value creation. There has to be some service components that are on the pragmatic aspect. So we are not only talking about amusement park experiences where it's all about the fun part and hedonic experience. We are talking about work context where people have to do their jobs properly. So pragmatic aspects are important, but still a simple example of making the experience better is giving some positive feedback or negative feedback, whatever is needed to make the system more human-centered. Like understanding, AI can understand what the person has been doing, how he has been developing, or she, and providing some feedback how this development is going. And these kind of more human-centered aspects are very easy to integrate. If it's just feedback giving, it can be integrated easily to the systems. And but I would be more fond of in designing a companion, AI companion, from the perspective of how this companion could serve the employee in his job. And if we have this mindset when we start designing the robots or AI systems, then we come up with very different set of functionalities in the system. and those hopefully improve the well-being, because this service attitude is helping to create better experience. And we will see these statements where well-being should be the primary success factor for AI systems. This is something that ethical discussion always tries to highlight.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks a lot. We have one more question, Luke. Luz or Luke? I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing.
No worries. It's Luz.
Luz, yeah.
I was wondering how would you initiate a service design approach in a company with a low UX maturity and that is not at all human-centered? I don't know if there are some generic phases. What's the starting point and what are the phases usually when we try to implement this kind of approach in this kind of company with low UX maturity?
Yes, I have been working with companies in heavy industry, like maritime companies working on autonomous ships, for example, and they don't traditionally have any UX people in-house. But when we have, well, these are research projects where there are many companies involved, and we are the ones to introduce them these methodologies, and we invite them to the co-design workshops where they are just like participants. They don't have to know anything, but they see how this works in practice. And that has inspired many companies a lot to develop this kind of working method when they can discuss together in the very early phases of service design. What do we need so that the value creation happens with all stakeholders? So that's one way, and I'm sure the industry people, if there are any here, will know much better ideas how to do that.
And just to, I was wondering if you notice, for example, that trying to trigger stakeholders' empathy towards the users, or even trigger managers' empathy towards the stakeholders or the employees, is part of that, or?
Yeah, I would say so, because both experience design and service design take the user in focus. Like the customer journey map is around the customer's journey and not the service provider's journey. So the methodology forces you to think about different parts of the journey. And this is often something that the companies haven't done before. And that already opens their eyes to see, okay, our product has this role during a service journey. So, well, does this help? I don't have the magic one to make everybody very empathetic towards the customer, but I have seen that the service journey is very good method to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's first give one round of applause for Virpi and also Pinar. Again, thank you very much, and thanks for joining us, answering the question. This was for me indeed very interesting, and I really have to dig into your literature, your work, and also see how and when we can use this service experience design. With this, I would like to stop the recording